Radha Shivasri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopa Sayam Kun Radhakunda Kiri Govardhan Kijai Vrindavanam Kijai Maturadam Kijai Jagannath Swami Kijai Yamunamai Kijai Shimani Lasudeva Kijai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Kijai Gaur Premananda Hari 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 Gaur. All glories, the assembled devotees. All glories, the assembled devotees. All glories, the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, so. Om Gana Timidandasha Ganajana Shalakaya Chakshun Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha. So before we go on to Bhagavatam, just want to mention briefly about two great personalities, one of whom appeared yesterday. That was Rasikananda Das Goswami, who we didn't have the time to talk about, and one of whom disappeared, or we're commemorating his disappearance day today. It's Vasudeva Ghosh. So first I mentioned Vasudeva Ghosh. Vasudeva Ghosh was one of three brothers who were instrumental in conducting kirtan during the Rath Yatra ceremony of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was present. There was Govinda Ghosh, Madhava Ghosh, and Vasudeva Ghosh. And in Krishna Leela, Vasudeva Ghosh is considered to be Guna Tunga Saki. Saki means one of the assistants of the gopis. And Vasudeva Ghosh composed many Vaishnava songs in Bengali, in simple Bengali, which Srila Prabhupada loved very much. So that's Vasudeva Ghosh. And as far as Rasikananda Deva Goswami, his story is quite interesting too. And it was his appearance day yesterday. So his father was actually a king. He wasn't born in a Brahmin family, although he was considered to be a great acharya. So this indicates that in order to be a great acharya in Krishna consciousness or a guru in Krishna consciousness, it doesn't matter whether one is born in a Shudra family, Vaishya family, Kshatriya family, or Brahmin family. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Kipa Nyashi Shudra Kena Nami. Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hoy. So anyway, so Tattva Veta, if one who knows the Tattvas, Tattvas are a very interesting subject matter because generally when we talk about tattvas, we're talking about material energy, spiritual energy, the jiva soul, and the supreme personality of Godhead, and knowing the relationships between these different tattvas. And of course, Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita that if one who knows this relationships, janma karma chami divyam evam yo veti tattvattaha, so which is pretty much the same thing. One who knows that Krishna's appearance and activities are transcendental beyond this material world. Chatvadeham punarjanma naiti mameti sojourner. Doesn't have to take birth again in the material world. Anyway, getting to the story of Rasikananda. At a very young age, he was very proficient in the Shastras and devoted to his parents. And he was married. His wife's name was Shama Devi. And one day he was sitting lamenting in a lonely place that he had not gotten a spiritual master. And he was in great anxiety about this. Then a voice from the sky stated, don't be in anxiety, you will become the disciple of Shaimananda. Because Shaimananda is the second generation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's a famous story. Of course, we don't have the time to tell the story that Shaimananda is the disciple of Hridaya Chaitanya, who is the disciple of Gauridas Pandit. Anyway, so his name was Rasik Murari before it became Rasikananda, became very jubilant, and he began to chant the name of his guru even before he met his guru. So, towards the next early morning, he drifted off into a dream state. Of course, when we talk about dreams of a pure devotee, it's not exactly like our dreams. and he saw his spiritual master. And Shaimananda said to him in the dream, when tomorrow the eastern sky becomes tinged with pink, that means dawn, you will attain me. So, with the first rays of the moment of the day, he met Shaimananda, and he bowed down, of course, to Shaimananda, and he was captivated by the sweet sounds of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidvaita Gadadha Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda emanating from the lips of Shaimananda. Shaimananda embraced him. They recognized each other. And Rasika Murari, who later on became Rasikananda, considered himself to be one of the most fortunate living beings within this universe. And shortly after that, on an auspicious day, Shaimananda initiated Rasika and his wife in the Radha Krishna mantra. And Rasikananda began to travel with his spiritual master, and his spiritual master gave him the service of worshiping Radha Govinda Dev at Gopi Vallabha Pura. And he also began to preach the message of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda in Gopi Vallabha Pura. And by his influence, many atheist unbelievers were delivered and took shelter of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was such an amazing preacher that he was able to convince many infidel Mohammedans. It's not that every Mohammedan is an infidel. And he even converted the wild elephant which was sent to destroy him into his disciple. In other words, he made a disciple of a wild elephant. And even the wicked Mohammedan who sent the wild elephant became his disciple. It's pretty amazing. And also many kings, zamindars, that means people who own land, landowners. King Patashpur took shelter of him, became his disciple. Another one named Bhima, who was another zamindar, landholder, and different Mohammedans and wicked atheists, Shrikar. So many people are mentioned here. So Rasikananda preached the message of Lord Chaitanya for many years, and after that he entered into the eternal pastimes through the lotus feet of Gopinath in Ramuna. Of course, Gopinath is the deity of the Shirachara Gopinath. And if you go to Ramuna, you will actually see, which I've gone to several times, you'll see the samadhi of Rasikananda right next, basically right in the same courtyard as the deities there. And he passed away in the full moon, in the first day of the bright fortnight in the month of Kartika, which was yesterday. Let's see, he had 3 sons, and they are the present servants of Radha Govinda Dev at Gopi Vallabhapura are the descendants of his sons. Okay, and he appeared in the Christian year 1590, and he disappeared in the Christian year 1652. So it is his, or was his, appearance day yesterday. So now we'll go on to Srimad Bhagavatam. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, Chapter 2, Text 14. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sandishtaivam Bhagavata Tateti Om Iti Tad vachaha apratigriya aparikramya gangvata tat tatakarot sandishtaivam bhagavataha tatyomiti tanvachaha pratigriya parikramya gamgata tattatakarot sandishtaivam bhagavata tatyomiti tanvachaha apratigriya aparikramya gamgata tattatakarot sandishtavyam bhagavata tatyomiti tadvachaha apratigriya parikramya gamgata tattatakarot. Okay.
Sandishtavam Bhagavatam Tatyomiti Tatvacha Pratigriya Parikramya Gamgata Tattatakara. Sandishtavam Bhagavatam Tatyomiti Tatvacha Pratigriya Parikramya Gamgata Tattatakara. Sandishtavam Bhagavatam Tatyomiti Tatvacha Pratigriya Parikramya Gamgata Tattatakara.
Okay. Sandishta, having been ordered. Evam, thus. Bhagavata, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tatahiti, so be it. Om, affirmation by the mantra Om. Iti, thus. Tat vachaha, his words. Pratigriya, accepting the order. Parikramya, after circumambulating him. Gam, to the surface of the globe. Gata, she immediately went. Tat, the order, as given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tata, just so. Akarot, executed. Translation. Thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yogamaya immediately agreed. With the Vedic mantra, Om, she confirmed that she would do what he asked. Thus, having accepted the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, she circumambulated him and started for the place on earth known as Nanda Gokul. There she did everything just as she had been told. So you can repeat it. You can repeat. Thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
Instructed by the Supreme Personality of God,
Yogamaya immediately agreed.
Yogamaya immediately agreed.
With the Vedic mantra Om,
With the Vedic mantra Om,
she confirmed that she would do
she confirmed that she will do
what he asked.
what he asked.
Thus, having accepted the order
Having accepted the order
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
of the Supreme Personality of God,
she circumambulated him
she circumambulated him,
and started for the place on earth
started for the place on earth,
known as Nanda Gokula.
known as Nanda.
There she did everything
There she did everything,
just as she had been told.
just as she had been told.
So purport by His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. After receiving the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yogamaya twice confirmed her acceptance by saying, "Yes, sir, I shall do as you order," and then saying, "Om." Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that Om signifies Vedic confirmation. Thus Yogamaya very faithfully received the Lord's order as a Vedic injunction. It is a fact that whatever is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a Vedic injunction that no one should neglect. In Vedic injunctions, there are no mistakes, illusions, cheating, or imperfection. Unless one understands the authority of the Vedic version, there is no purpose in quoting Shastra. No one should violate the Vedic injunctions. Rather, one should strictly execute the orders given in the Vedas, as stated in Bhagavad Gita in the 16th chapter, text 24. Tasmat shastram brahmanam te karya vyavastita gyatva shastra vitanoktam karma kartum miharasi. One should understand what is duty and what is not duty by the regulations of the scriptures. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so that one may gradually be elevated. Okay? Santishta evam bhagavata tatetyam iti tadvachku pratigriya parakramya gam gata tat Kurut. So Om Gana Timidanda Sha Gananjana Kaya Chakshur Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, first of all, Yogamaya. Who is Yogamaya? Yogamaya, of course, is the personification of the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Vrindavan, Yogamaya is represented by a Purnamasi. Purnamasi, of course, is the mother of Sandapani Muni and the grandmother of Madhu Mangal. It's very interesting. And so Madhu Mangal was sent by Sandapani Muni to Vrindavan to assist Krishna in his pastimes, and he sent his mother to make sure Madhu Mangal was all right. So anyway, so that's Yogamaya. But Yogamaya is internal potency, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And of course, the Adi Shakti of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Srimati Radharani, and basically all the potencies expand from her. Of course, first we have Srimati Radharani, and then we have the Lalita and Vishaka and the Astasakis, and then the other gopis expand from Srimati Radharani. And of course, some of the gopis are Jiva Tattva, and some of them are Shakti Tattva. And then from Srimati Radharani and her associates and the gopis that are Shaktis there, then we have the queens in Dwarka. Of course, generally it's described that Srimati Radharani expands directly as Satyabhama, who is Krishna's queen, one of Krishna's queens in Dwarka, and she's a queen who is a left-handed queen. Left-handed queen means that she argues with Krishna and nags him sometimes. Just like when she was nagging for the parijata plant or flower that had been previously given to her co-wife, Rukmini. And so she nagged so much that Krishna got her a whole bush of parijata flowers, and he had to fight with the residents of the heavenly planets in order to get her the bush of the parijata flowers. And of course, we have Chandravali, who expands as Rukmini, who is more submissive, and submissive in the sense that she doesn't argue with Krishna, that even when Krishna just tried to tease her and get her angry, she just fainted. Because there's this pastime in the Krishna book, in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Krishna is telling Rukmini, when Rukmini is actually a grandmother, but she's always looking young, Krishna tells her, get a divorce and get remarried. You marry the wrong person. And Rukmini, instead of getting angry with Krishna, she just faints. So these different moods. Of course, they're serving Krishna in these different moods. Quite interesting in the Gopal Champu of Srila Jiva Goswami. We're reading some of the chapters in the Gopal Champu and doing some narrations on these chapters. It's mentioned that Krishna eventually, this is Jiva Goswami's realization, Krishna eventually comes back to Vrindavan after everything is done, all of his duties are done outside of Vrindavan. He comes back to Vrindavan, and then it's arranged that he directly marries the gopis. And the interesting thing is, it's revealed to the residents of Vrindavan that all the gopis' husbands were just like illusions. And Krishna's able to marry. Anyway, that's another story. So anyway, so the gopis and the wives of Krishna, they expand as the consorts of Krishna's expansions, such as the Lakshmis in the spiritual world. And anyway, so Yogamaya is one of those expansions like that. And she serves Krishna by arranging for the different circumstances for Krishna's pastimes. She's like the stage manager. You understand? Like if you have a play, she actually manages, you have to have a manager who manages the scenery, the lighting, and everything like that in the play. And so she manages the different forests in Vrindavan. She manages the circumstances in Dwarka. And so she has a very interesting service to do. And being the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and she expands as the external potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Mahamaya. But all these different expansions of Srimati Radharani, beginning with the gopis, and then coming to the wives of Krishna, and the Yogamaya, etc., and Lakshmis, they're all first-class servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what's mentioned here is that when Krishna wants something, they do it immediately. In fact, they don't even have to be told what Krishna wants, because they understand the desires of Krishna, the mentality of Krishna. Just like we have in our Sampradaya, Srila Rupa Goswami, a similar statement is made about him. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swa Vedantikam. And Srila Rupa Goswami Manobishtam, you understand the mind of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the intention of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that's why we are considered Rupanugas, or followers of Srila Rupa Goswami, because Rupa Goswami understood the mind of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the same way we could say that His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder of Acharya Viskan, understood and does understand the mind of his spiritual master, and also the mind of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is what it means to be a disciple, to be a servant, etc., like this. And of course, most servants in this material world are either third class or 10th class. Third class means they don't understand the mind, they don't like doing what the spiritual master wants or what the Supreme Personality of Godhead wants, but they do it anyway. And 10th class means they don't do it. So anyway, so this is Yoga Maya. And in the spiritual world, Yoga Maya also is able to, by the Lord's desire, influence the Supreme Personality of Godhead in different ways. Actually causing Krishna sometimes, by his desire, to forget things, which is really interesting. And not to be omniscient. It's like in this Gopal Champa, which we mentioned before. There's such an interesting discussion between Krishna and Narada Muni. You know, Krishna is seeing that it's time for him to leave Vrindavan, but he's very reluctant to do so. He definitely doesn't want to leave Vrindavan because he's very attached to the gopis, but at the same time, he sees that his mother and father are being tortured in the prison house of Kamsa. That's Vasudeva and Devaki. And so he's having a little bit of, let's say, an emotional issue. He's suffering from an emotional issue at this particular juncture. You know, what should I do? And that's called a conflict, you know, like approach, like et cetera, like that. There's different types of conflicts. So he's saying, you know, I should do this, I should do that. But I don't want to leave the gopis, they'll die without me. So Narada Muni comes to try to convince Krishna it's time to leave Vrindavan. So the reason I'm telling the story is that Krishna appears not to be omniscient in this particular exchange between himself and Narada Muni, because Narada Muni is describing why Krishna has to leave Vrindavan, and Krishna says, well, am I coming back right after that? And Narada Muni says, no. And then Krishna says, then, actually goes through this whole thing. He describes to Krishna everything that Krishna's going to do. He says, you know, you're going to enter Mathura, you're going to kill this washerman, you know, chop off his head, you're going to dress yourself up nicely with all these clothes, then after that, you're going to meet Kubja, and you're going to have some exchange with Kubja. And it's interesting, in this Gopal Champa, there's Srimati Radharani is commenting on Krishna's relationship with Kubja. So you're going to meet Kubja, then after that you're going to kill the elephant Kuvalyapita, and after that you're going to kill the wrestlers, Chanura and Mushtaka, and after that you're going to kill Kamsa, and then Krishna says, then am I going back? It's really interesting how Krishna is apparently not aware of what's going to happen. And Narada Muni says, not yet. And then he describes the different, you know, killing the different demons like Jarasandha. Well, Jarasandha is killed later on, sorry. Then Krishna's fighting with Jarasandha so many times, and he has to transport everyone to Dwarka to save them, and Krishna says, and then am I going back? And so Krishna, it's so interesting that under the influence of Yogamaya, Krishna appears not to really remember anything or know anything, even though he's God. You know, the quality of God is omniscience and omnipotent and everything like that. So then Narada Muni says, no, then you're going to get a letter from this girl, Rukmini, and you get married to her. She says, what? And raise children? And then you're going to kill. Anyways, he describes how you're going to kill the demon, and you're going to marry 16,100 wives. You're going to wrestle 16,100 wives. Then you're going to wrestle with a bull and get another Mitravinda. And anyway, so many wives are being described in this particular circumstance. And then you're going to have all these children and grandchildren. Krishna, then am I going back? So he goes through this, all the pastimes that Krishna's getting, I mean, at least the majority of pastimes, primary pastimes, Krishna's keeps asking, and then am I going back? And then am I going back? Why can't I go back? And then finally, Narada Muni says, well, then you're going to go back. And Krishna says, Jai. And he describes the marriage of Radha and Krishna and all these different circumstances that occur. So the point I'm making is that Yogamaya causes Krishna to forget. And this is Krishna's enjoyment, that he forgets he's the supreme. Because if you're omniscient, you know what's going to happen. It makes life kind of boring. You know, today this is going to happen, today that's going to happen. You say, all right, Hare Krishna. What's the use? What's the use? Of course, we all want to know the future. We go to the astrologers, and we ask the astrologer, when am I going to die? And of course, the astrologers are generally wrong nowadays anyway. So life should be interesting. In Krishna's life, he wants to be very interesting. Therefore, he employs Yogamaya. So that's Yogamaya. Second point here in the purport is about whatever is spoken by the Supreme Personality of God is a Vedic injunction. No one should neglect. Also, there's another verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Shastra Vidam Nishruja Vartate Kamakarata, that if one rejects the injunctions of Shastra, Nasukam na param gatim, he can never be happy or achieve the supreme destination. So what does that mean, to follow the Vedic injunctions, or in the negative, not to violate the Vedic injunctions? It means that one has to apply the Vedic injunctions according to the instructions of the spiritual master. And that's why we have Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. You can't really take Vedic injunctions out of context. In fact, Arjuna was going to do that. And Krishna said to Arjuna, basically, you're taking it out of context. Straguni Vishya Veda Nishraguni Babarjuna, near Dwandwal Nitrasattvasto, near Yoga Kshema Atmavan, that the Vedic literatures are mainly dealing with, for people, or the injunctions are mainly for people who are not Krishna conscious, which is interesting. Mainly for people who are not devotees. Why? Because most people are not devotees. Just like you see, even in talking about educational standards, I was just looking at the map of the United States, anyway, the Republican areas and the Democrat areas. And it's actually quite interesting that it really maps out where people are educated and where people are not educated. And, along the coast and the cities, you got people who are educated, and they tend to vote a particular way. Not that I'm telling people to vote in a particular way, because that's not permitted for someone in a religious society. And in certain places where people are not educated, they're members of a different party, which is really interesting. Anyway, but the majority of people, especially in Kali Yuga, Kalo Shudra Sambhavat, the majority of people are not going to be just like gung-ho, back to Godhead, back to home, back to Godhead people. I mean, you even see in the Krishna consciousness movement that people start in a very gung-ho way, and then, what do they say? They get up and go, got up and went. So, it's just like, who is there for the long haul? Of course, in long haul means, the whole lifetime serving Krishna. And then after you serve your whole lifetime serving Krishna, then you say, Krishna, I served you my whole lifetime. What have you given me, an old body? I did everything. I served the deities, dressed the deities, 10,234,456. And what do I get from it? So, anyway, as Krishna said to the gopis, the only thing I can do to repay you is your own devotion. The only way I can repay you is your own devotion. So anyway, So even in the Krishna consciousness movement, we find that people come for various reasons, etc. And they have all these desires. So therefore, Prabhupada wanted varnashram, so that people would have a fallback position, so they wouldn't go all the way back down to hippiedom. So that was one of the reasons. Also for preaching Krishna consciousness. So we have to understand that even within the Krishna conscious society, there'll be different Vedic injunctions that are for different people, even within the society, what to speak of outside the society. So Krishna is telling Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that the Vedic injunctions are mainly for those in the modes of nature. So it requires the guru or sadhu to understand how to apply the Vedic injunctions. I was listening the other day, of course, Hridayananda Maharaj, he was speaking that even Lord Chaitanya did not follow the Vedic injunction as far as how to dress as a sannyasi. It was very interesting. He said there's two options for a sannyasi to dress. One option is either like deer skin or tree bark, and the other option is naked with copiness. Anyway, so Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't do either. But does that mean he was violating the Vedic injunctions? No, because he was understanding the purpose behind the Vedic injunctions and applying it accordingly, time, place, and circumstance. So one has to be very, very careful. You find people pulling injunctions out of the Manusamhita, which is not a Vedic injunction, Vedic literature anyway. Because Vedic literature, of course, the word Veda means knowledge. Vedanta means the conclusion of knowledge. So Vedic literatures are literature spoken by pure devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. We have the Bhagavad Gita as a Vedic literature, and then one has to understand which Vedic literatures are present in their original form. Like we have Bhagavad Gita, and we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, but the Mahabharata, as you've heard many times, is not actually present in its original form. Sripad Madhvacharya in his Tatpara Niraya says that the Mahabharata has been corrupted in many ways, or changed in many ways, or things added to the Mahabharata in many ways. So what we accept as Vedic instructions or Vedic literatures also have to be given to us by our acharyas in disciplic succession. It's not that you can just go on the internet and Google something and come up with different injunctions that you have to follow. And devotees nowadays, of course, they've come up with all these different injunctions, all these different rituals, and even superstitious stuff, snapping your fingers before every time you yawn, just so, and it's not coming from Prabhupada, it's not coming from disciplic succession. So we have to be careful what we actually term Vedic injunctions, and we have to be careful how we apply those Vedic injunctions according to time, place, and circumstance. Therefore, we have need of guidance, Guru Shastra Sadhu. So any questions or comments about these points? Questions, comments, arguments, problems, issues, discussions, complaints? Yes? Will?
Yeah, I know I'm an American citizen and I was born on this part of the planet. But all the holidays we have should be irrelevant. Halloween, all these Christmas things. But the holidays we should be celebrating, though, would be the ones like how I was born.
Yes, I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
The ones that would die in the past today, on the day today.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. These should be on the American calendar. So we should vote for that. next election. And one interesting thing about holidays that we haven't covered when we were, just as a side note, when I was at Govardhan, everybody was celebrating the Mahalosman to me, the appearance day of Radhakund. So it turns out that Jiva Goswami says that Radhakund didn't appear then.
Oh, I saw that. I can't remember who it was. Somebody posted that.
Well, I actually came up with it. I did some research, and the commentaries of Jiva Goswami, which I have from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam.
I think it was even, because something came through, I don't get my Maybe Swami stuff that much, but it showed up on Facebook, and he also was quoting
Yeah,
the same.
it's in like March on a full moon day.
Oh,
that-
interesting.
Yeah, according to Jiva Goswami, according to our acharyas. But anyway, but whatever, people can celebrate. That's why I said it's not yet the end of the world, because if you glorify and celebrate any day of the year, it's also good.
It's interesting, though.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I was going to ask you about that, because I saw it posted that someone had said.
Yeah, I actually talked about that when I was in Govardhan. Anyway, so every day can be a holiday in Krishna consciousness.